Hello, everybody. Welcome. I very much appreciate the attention of those of you who listen and those of you who support my channel and my work. And even if sometimes the content isn't as sharp as it might be, when you listen to a rock album, or perhaps a comedian, not every stroke's a hit, right? And we have to make attempts. We have to actually make attempts, not think about making them. To practice our skills and passions and unique gifts as human beings. And if the world doesn't present us with a context in which to do it, though perhaps it always does if we're impassioned and motivated enough to see it. What I mean is, like, if somebody doesn't serve you up a context in which to practice your humanity, your personal humanity, your communal humanity, perhaps also your tribal humanity, which may be different. Right? We might need, as moderns, maybe we need at least 3 different contexts. And I would argue that, I would suggest, a softer term, we need all 3, and some communal endeavors can nourish all 3 at once. I think there's, 4 or 5 more I could probably name, because we're not merely human. But if the world doesn't serve you up an easily accessible context in which to practice, an existing niche, a word that I always thought was pronounced niche, as to rhyme with pitch rather than quiche. In other words, if there's not an easily accessible niche for your to practice, then you have to make them. A Tai Chi person, for example, landing in a place where there's no one to practice with, may decide to continue their practice alone. And so the practice remains not merely in the personal context, because these practices they come from lineages. Right? So they are, in a sense, tribal. The people who study Chen style, for example, are one of the tribes of Tai Chi people, at least in language. And Tai Chi people recognize each other as an extended family, without explicitly being a religion. It properly serves many of the functions of one. By creating a communal identity context or construct that is pro-individual, pro-tribal, pro-communal, pro-healing. I mean, you've got traditional Chinese medicine woven into that stuff. You've got a really effective substitute for the catastrophic ineffectiveness of religion. And many Tai Chi schools are free. People just come together at a certain time in a certain place and practice. And if the old men are all together practicing and a young person comes, and the old men will get together to practice, they know there are many benefits to practicing together. Many benefits. That you can't really make up for by practicing alone. The communal spirit, the little tribe spirit of the group that helps each other learn Tai Chi, Tai Chi Chuan, there's nothing like it. It's profound. It protects you from disease. It protects you from despair. It protects you from depression. It keeps your body healthy and gives you a simple way to improve your health in an ongoing way all the time, and to face health crises with much greater resilience and preparedness, generally speaking. Similarly, to face recovery from health crises. So, you're getting free healthcare just by doing Tai Chi. It's not perfect, it won't cure all diseases. But TCM is very powerful when practiced by a knowledgeable, lineage-trained, transferred practitioner. By transferred, I mean they had an actual, a very skillful, very knowledgeable teacher who transferred those skills to them, not merely by study and practice together, by a sort of agreement between teacher and protege, right? So, am I recommending Tai Chi? Absolutely. But what I was saying is, if a Tai Chi person comes to a place where no one is practicing, they don't see anyone out practicing, they might just start practicing in public. Okay? Now, ordinarily, Tai Chi is something you want to do privately. You don't want to be on display. But there are exceptions. In a city where no one does Tai Chi, you might start doing it publicly. You might even put up little, notes, Tai Chi for health, right, around the city. Here's where we meet, here's the time, donations only. Everyone can come. And so then they go and they practice, and one or two people show up, and then they practice, and 3 or 4 people show up, and if things are good, very soon, 10 or 15 people will be there together practicing. And very few of those people will have any idea what it is they are actually practicing. They will learn mostly choreography with some foundations. Right? Oh, this is so funny. So they will learn the movements, and the teacher, who may themselves just be a student who has moved away from their teacher, right? Often in such a case, the teacher will tell the student when they're leaving, presuming there even is a teacher, that the relationship is formal. In Tai Chi, usually called Sifu, martial arts, Sifu. But the teacher will often tell the student, when you get to Tombstone, Arizona, set up your teaching practice there. And the student will be like, what? What do you mean my teaching practice? And the teacher will say, "Oh, I see. You think you're not ready to teach." And the student says, "Absolutely not. Of course I'm not ready to teach. What are you thinking?" And the teacher says, "No, what are you thinking? Don't you see that teaching is a better way to learn? You will learn much faster, yeah, by teaching. So you think you are new to the art. Yes, you are. You've only been doing it X amount of time, right? In this case, let's say like 9 months or something, yeah? A little bit. Now, what will happen to your practice if you don't support it in Tombstone? Well, it will get a tombstone. I mean, if you're really fervent, you might continue it, but you'll have a much easier time continuing it and deepening it with others who have become interested. So take the little booklet of the principles I have given you with you to the graveyard and plant a seed there of Tai Chi. Now, this is the funny thing about this is that the society of Tai Chi people is a society within our society where people nurture, support, care for, encourage, and empower each other. Not just to learn Tai Chi, right? Yes, of course, also to learn Tai Chi, yeah? But many, many things. To learn equanimity, to learn resilience, to learn a joyful way of life, a joyful path, to learn to find and create a joyful path in life, to laugh together, to overcome hardship together, all of these things. So you have something, and by the way, they don't have a constitution, right? They don't have like rules written in stone. They don't even need to, for example, declare what rights of individuals must be preserved within the communal context, because they invent that context together moment by moment in relation. And yes, there's competition and, guys peacocking and whatever. It's martial arts. I'm not saying it's all pure, water of life. But compared to our ordinary societies, the purity quotient is enormous. Now, when you begin doing Tai Chi, you eventually discover something peculiar about it. And what's peculiar about it is that there is an outer form and an inner form. The outer form might be understood as the choreography. You move these limbs and your torso in these ways. You place your weight. You distribute your weight over your feet in these ways. In a sequence, over time, usually slowly. Beautiful sound. But where is his mate? Do I not see her? Hey, bud, where's your lady? Where's your female? You're on your own at mating season? Wow. All right. I wonder why. Did something get her? Huh. So there's an outer form and an inner form. And the outer form is visually striking and beautiful, resembling a mixture of a martial arts form, a fighting form, and a dance. The really strange thing about Tai Chi is that the inner form is secret. You can give the outer form away for free. Almost none of those people, unless they're very dedicated, nearly none of them will begin to practice the inner form. Some of them will discover it on their own over time, especially if they learn that such a thing exists. I was listening to an older Sifu. What was his tradition? I can't remember. And he said a few things I found quite interesting. But one of them was, back in the days when the shogunate or the emperor or whoever in, say, China or Japan, one thing they didn't want existing anywhere were martial arts practitioners, because they had the power to defy an attempt at coercion by violence, right? They had the power to, if not completely block a small crew of violent males sent to do harm somewhere, they could certainly make it very costly for them to do so in terms of, lost agents of tyrannical dictatorships, right? Like lost soldiers. So, there were many times in history when the tyrannical rulers sent out assassins, right? Or just killers, I guess assassin is a sort of code word for a very sophisticated, skillful thing. These guys just went around murdering people with swords and such. And if they heard, that there was a martial arts practitioner in some village or town, they'd kill them first. So, what this teacher said, which I thought was fucking amazing actually, is that in order to preserve the forms, they hid them in slow dance-like movements so that they could somewhat reasonably claim that they were just exercising, right? And so you can see that really what they did is they encrypted the inner Tai Chi form so that it could be passed on and preserved. The outer form would form like an envelope, right? An encryption, an encrypted envelope that inside would contain Tai Chi Chuan, the essence of it. And what is the essence of Tai Chi Chuan? Well, it's a complex thing to answer. The essence of Tai Chi Chuan is a spirit of discovery and self-refinement. That in the form is expressed with internal movements of the body, right, that lead to movement of the outer body. So that effectively the mind moves the body, and there are internal coilings, energy transfers, and releasings that becomes sort of like a symphony over time. These things are learned not merely by physically practicing them, but by imagining them happening. So in a sense, Tai Chi Chuan, the inner path of it, requires a complex array of visualization skills. One imagines transferring energy, for example, from a place on the sole of the foot to a dantian in the lower abdomen, a little bit below the belly button, back a couple of 3 fingers maybe, a little ball of energy there. And then into, right, so the departing foot transfers energy into the dantian, which then transfers energy into the stepping foot. And then the stepping foot anchors that energy or makes it float, right? And this kind of thing. There is a place in the palm of your hand which is approximately, hello, the young ravens, they are so big, the teenagers are so big. I might even just be crows, but I doubt it. Their beaks are too dang big to be crows.
They love their peanuts.
Peanuts are bird heroin. Yeah. A twitcher I know, probably the most knowledgeable birder around here. Super bird geeky guy. Said that to me one day. It's like, yeah, peanuts are bird heroin. He has a lot of birds in his home. Tai Chi is a doorway to the memory of the origin and the nature and the abilities of the human soul. Maybe the spirit is a better word here. And the principles embodied in the movements are not merely attacks, parries, entanglements, and so forth. They come from animal dances, primarily, but they were also developed by many different masters of an art we rarely see evidence of today. It's very difficult to be trained properly in Tai Chi in 2024, I imagine. The teachers of the internal path are few and old and difficult to get to, though there may be some out there in the wild somewhere. And one can discover it on one's own, but it would probably have to be like your primary life focus. All day Tai Chi, every day, kind of thing. So even if you do Tai Chi, if you do your Tai Chi in public, there used to be like a competition, right, between the different houses of Tai Chi. Wu, Chen, I'm forgetting most of the names. Perhaps some others will come to me. So there was, back in the days when Tai Chi practice was very common in China and Japan particularly, there was competition between the schools. So you wanted to hide certain techniques and so forth. Also, if whatever you are practicing is being observed by others, that is different from practicing it privately. But they encrypted it anyway, probably for reasons very similar to what was said by that old teacher. And so over time, what happened was it kind of split into two paths: the Tai Chi for health path and the Tai Chi for combat path. And then the latter split into two paths: Tai Chi for actual, superiority on the battlefield, right? Which has to get tested all the time. And what we could call posing, which is the study of Tai Chi as if it were effective in hand-to-hand combat. The schools that practice for health are broad and well entrenched. The schools that practice for combat are relatively few, and the ones that practice for actual battle efficiency are very few. There are some, though. Though these days, many of the lineages have become muddied by, we practice 17 art, we practice 6 different martial arts or whatever. I practice Tai Chi for health. I'm not a fighter. Though I imagine, given the need. Tai Chi is surprisingly useful if you practice it regularly. It will serve you in combat, even if it doesn't. You probably don't want to rely on it, right? Because the other person's going to be throwing rapid fire attacks and possibly tabling very effective parries and or entanglement. So, and what do I mean by entanglement? Well, it should be obvious. I mean like jiu-jitsu, grappling stuff. Entanglement is probably, I would think of it as the feminine aspect of martial arts. Because it's capturing, binding, twisting, and locking. So all of these things deprive someone of movement rather than, or possibly consciousness, rather than exchanging blows with them. Now, if you think carefully, you want to be prepared to deal with blows, but you want to receive as few of them as possible. Right, with none being the preferred accounting, right? Yeah, 0. So am I recommending Tai Chi Chuan? Absolutely. If you can study Tai Chi, get to it. Unless you have a really strong aversion. If you spend time jogging or at the gym, Tai Chi will serve you better than those things in nearly all cases. Though it will also complement other, practices of athleticism. But it will teach you principles that are very, very deep and are in fact metaphysical. You don't have to sign up, right? You don't have to believe the church of Tai Chi. But the first time you feel Chi and transfer it to another person, you will be convinced that something you did not understand previously is and has long been going on Earth. The feeling of chi is not too hard to generate. You can learn to generate chi fairly quickly with any reasonable teacher if that's part of your goal. But yeah, the experience of chi will change your life. What is meant by this? It is life energy. It is the primordial energy that other modes are related to or derivations of, right? Like light, for example.
Yeah, like Fort Miley. Yeah.
And chi is intelligent. It's not just a force.
With this, and then getting business from Journey Road because of the commission. You know, it's like they're digging into that relationship.
Any teacher at all is better than no teacher, so don't worry too much about finding the best teacher. If you have a lot of money, or you live somewhere where you're lucky and there's more than one or two skillful teachers, then of course, do your homework, pick the best one. I mean, pick the best one anyway, but if you want to lift your mood, improve your health, benefit your cognition, your sense of balance, your digestion, your immune system, your physical and emotional resilience, the practice of Tai Chi will contribute dramatically to all of these things. Even if only done 15, 20 minutes a day, right? Even if you just do your form once in the day, it's enough. Right? And then you meet and work a little longer form with the teacher once a week or something, right? Now I bring up Tai Chi for a strange reason. I wasn't actually intending to talk at length about Tai Chi. What I thought was really interesting was that it's encrypted. You see 50 elderly people in a park on Saturday morning here in the city. Most of them are wearing white. They're gracefully moving through the form, led by a teacher. You certainly don't think, it's the Grey Warriors. These are the ass-kicking, soldiers of what's that district? Of North Beach. No, you it looks like elderly people are doing a health dance or something. And mostly that's probably what they are doing. But underneath that are anciently developed and perfected and conserved principles of physical engagement and disarming, entanglement, lethal strikes, organ shattering. This stuff is quite serious when the internal articulation is accomplished. Nature as we perceive it Tai Chi is emulating a feature of nature, which is to hide the intelligence, particularly from the humans, and meta particularly from the humans who have defected from intelligence. To hide the intelligence so it can't be weaponized. Because if something captures the basis of life on Earth, the metalog to Chi, and weaponizes that, everything dies, including the weaponizers around here. So like Tai Chi, nature has the outward form, the shape, color, sound, smell, texture, template, instance. And with the right lens, an intelligent human can learn to see the hereditary fingerprint of the spirit within, above, below, beneath all beings. With the right kind of lens, your body and mind become the decryption, the enaction of decryption. And you begin to see beyond what humans see. It is natural for all of us to do this. It is dangerous to stumble onto the discovery of these lenses, and it's part of what people seek in high-risk endeavors or physical testing of the body endeavors, particularly combat, sex, particularly orgasm, which is a fundamental transformation of the lens of being. There are many different kinds of orgasm, not merely the kinds that are achieved by rubbing flowers together. And also in art, in music, in dance, excuse me, in comedy, in drama, in literature, in comic books. There's a way of partly decoding the encryption, the fundamental encryption. What have I done here? If the artist creates a perfectly photorealistic rendition of an actual photograph, the process whereby they create that is a form of decryption. And demands strange lenses in the mind that help us to understand how to produce visual textures with graphite on paper, such that they so resemble the textures of light captured by a photographic medium, which are certainly different between electronic captures and analog captures with lenses. There are an array of intelligences: physical, perceptual, perspectival, that are involved. But if they produce instead a creative rendering of, I was actually thinking for some reason about a coyote, right? Creative rendering of a coyote, then what happens is it is as if very unique intelligences that belong to the dreaming mind and the child's way of seeing the world and the imagination and the emoto-cognitive relationship and the participatory aspects of human intelligence, then these begin to infuse the art. And Tai Chi is very similar in this way. It can be infused by all of those things very profoundly. And the practice of visualizing something, even if you're aphantasic to some degree, just walking through the steps in your mind, visualizing the path. Even if you can't see and you only see blackness, you can still pretend to see an image, what it might look like if you move your arm in thus and such a way. That visualization is very profoundly useful. But what I want to actually point at here is that there are accessible lenses that decrypt that bird sound you just heard. There are accessible lenses that will let you look at the sunlight on a body of water and understand things that are impossible to ordinary human cognition. There are lenses that allow participation in non-human conversations. There are lenses that decrypt physical reality to such a degree that looking at a physical object, you can know its history, its provenance, its ancestry, its lineage. Looking at a human being, you can know their name. And people say, oh, that's psychism. Not necessarily. We might have this totally backwards, where that's the natural state of most human minds, and something's interfering with that, so that it seems very rare. People have the joke, well, if you're a psychic, tell me the question I'm going to ask next. not realizing that the future isn't written in stone, especially in a relationship. We negotiate the future together. This is the natural way of being human. We determine the question by a sort of mutual dancing. Physics and mathematics can be understood in a sense as a series of lenses, interfaces, if you will,
Depends how you feel. If you're down for the dark.
between cognition and what I'll call the world, but I mean, the universe. We don't usually have direct experience of the universe beyond the scale. I mean, what is the scope of our direct experience is an interesting question. And on the one hand, hello. I suspect this is the little bird I heard singing yesterday. It's very tiny and super vital. Its tail sticks up at an angle. Is it dancing? It might be, because it's not feeding. Yeah, I wonder what the scope, of our experience is. We moderns know there's something in the sky beyond the earth. But we might be the least intelligent people in all of human history. I would argue we probably are. About what that is. Science hasn't brought us closer to knowing what it is. If anything, science keeps telling us more and more about what it isn't. Because what it isn't is a dead, empty, mechanical vacuum. No chance of that producing a living planet like this one. None. Zero. We will definitely find that that is not what happened here. If our species lives past its addiction to absurdity in machines. Our capacity to forge and utilize new lenses together, which is a metaphor of a way of manipulating consciousness to produce specific perspectives that are otherwise quite difficult to imagine or get access to. Many people are entertained by science fiction, and when I use those two words together, I don't necessarily mean whatever that seems to mean today, which I'm actually not even sure what those two words usually mean or mostly mean circa 2024. I'm using them, with a nod to Korzybski, in the way they were understood in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and before. These stories were profoundly amazing and compelling, And they were compelling because they gave us new ways of seeing into the nature of the human relationship with time, space, technology, intelligence, each other, what we might think of as the fundamental forces, and the possibilities introduced by the idea of space travel, which is one of the most profound ideas in the history of human thinking. At the same time, it seems obvious, if we look carefully at the traditions, art, and architecture of ancient cultures of humans on Earth, at least that we must imagine to have been humans, what am I going to do about this? I'm going to talk with a musical background. I think I'm going to have to change course. So science fiction to a precocious young person or older person will give you lenses that you're very unlikely to compose yourself or to employ yourself. And this is its primary value. And that value is far greater than whatever entertainment might emerge from your reading a story or seeing a film. The real value is the intelligence you can absorb, inherit, refashion as your own if you're thinking that way about your experience and you're not just defecting from consciousness by watching a show or reading a book. Not a problem for the people who prefer that mode, but different. Different in what one receives very dramatically. Having read a few thousand science fiction stories, my mind has many mothers and fathers. My lens-making aspect, I even remember a story where a particular kind of technological lens that one could wear created highly intelligent sort of superhumans that were called lensmen. But consciousness gets structured by purpose. And if the purpose is insight, and we are curious and we want to see new features of a familiar landscape, as from above, or as from within, or as from a concern, right? What you will notice about the lenses we make in consciousness is that our concerns and purposes determine what the lens will produce when employed. Right? And what I'm talking about here is a metaskill, right? A skill that supervenes over all other skills. And many people who become performatively excellent, right, they are aware that there are metaskills. There are skills that contribute to the efficacy, progeneration, depth, and capacity to innovate. There are skills that have these features that are outside any specific skill domain. I'm not sure if I'm a, quote, visual learner or not. But, and though I do not usually see pictures in my mind, sometimes I can or do, what I can see are invisible things that are a bit like invisible geometries that link features of thought, experience, behavior, reflection, creativity, in ways that my regular mind, my everyday mind, is very unlikely to conceive of, let alone employ. And, humor is a way of kind of deconstructing common experience to produce a giggle. Or, total loss of control. And I'm not here today to make jokes about humor being hilarious, which of course we all know that humor is hilarious the same way that chocolate tastes great for those of us who like it. But my mind is in a different mode, right? You can see I'm actually doing what I'm talking about. I'm using a lens that allows me to talk about using lenses. I'm using a lens that allows me to talk about forging new lenses. I'm using a lens that allows me to talk, hopefully usefully, about combining unusual lenses in consciousness, partly by forming novel purposes for seeing. And I'm using a lens that allows me to talk about metaskills. And that's presuming that I'm using a lens at all. The concept is metaphoric, not literal. But I have noticed that concern shapes attention, which in turn transforms concern. And you could replace the word concern with the word purpose. Tai Chi's actual purpose is transcendental. Its actual purposes are transcendental, but it uses directly accessible ladders to allow us to move in that direction until it becomes natural for us to form and employ the lenses in awareness and in our physical bodies that produce Tai Chi. I'm pretty sure what Tai Chi actually means is something like supreme ultimate. It doesn't say, supreme ultimate fighting. It says supreme ultimate. This is what my original teacher, Casey Mao, said. And I trust him. I think he's telling the truth. I've heard other people say similar things. If even some of the encryption of nature was removed from your cognition, or if you could put a lens in place that buffered the encryption and delivered some of the inner message, the experience you would have would be more heroic than any story you've ever heard, dangerous as hell, and ecstatically beautiful beyond anything you can possibly hope for, because you're certainly incapable of imagining, no matter how imaginative you might be, the beauty of what is actually going on in and around and within and above us. religion's wildest promises of paradise would pale in the face of the beauty of something as simple as a tadpole or a house spider. I have avoided my main topic for today, which was the recreation of a recording I made yesterday. And that's all right. I was practicing retaining better topical focus today. I hope you will continue to wonder at the strange landscape of encryption and the human relationship to it, the relationship particularly of religious books to this, because if you write down the actual secret, if you have any enemies or if there's anyone who can weaponize it, both things will come and get you, right? So, when you read Taoist texts, for example, the Tao Te Ching, which is Taoism and Tai Chi Chuan go hand in hand. When you read these texts, they're inscrutably linguistically impenetrable. That's not an accident. And it's not merely romantic poesy, right? We're so in love, we're so impassioned that we're speaking in parabolic, metonymic prose, right? No, that stuff's encryption. And most of the intelligent people who were trying to encode something for future generations, whether that something was the Mona Lisa or an array of mathematical formulas, they were using encryption, even if it is not obvious. Even perhaps if they were unaware of it. Our subconscious minds, our interiority, could be understood to encrypt some of its content with what we call symbols. And if we think carefully about what those are, or may be, or what they do in human cognition, we will certainly find a world whose beauty and depth, whose intelligences and strangeness eclipses science fiction, religion, science itself, and math.
You're not coming this year, and I'm going to bring you this
The origins of our ways of knowing are buried in our bones and cells, available to excavation for those who the project sufficiently fascinates. And if that's you, I'm glad to have your ear. And if it isn't, may your path be blessed and true to your spirit. And nevertheless, Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye for now.
40.